Hello everyone, Raycon Dumber here. If you didn't know already, I am a massive fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It's one of my absolute favorite series. Let's get into Demonic Heartbreak, a spin-off series of JoJo bridging the gap between Stardust Crusaders Part 3 and Diamond is Unbreakable Part 4, following Josuke and one of the best enemy stand users, Whole Horse, going on a quest together. There will be spoilers for Demonic Heartbreak and Parts 3 and 4 of JoJo. Let's break down this manga and get into what I think about it. The main story here is that Whole Horse, who is one of the enemy stand users of Part 3, is tasked to find a parrot that was trained under the same man as Pet Shop, which was the bird ice stand user from Part 3. Boingo, another enemy stand user of Part 3, uses his stand Toth, which is the comic book that tells the future. It directs them to Morio, where they come into contact with Josuke Higashikata, who is the JoJo of Part 4, and Ryoko, who is Kakuin's cousin, with Kakuin being one of the Stardust Crusaders, and how they all intersect to interact with an enemy stand user. Despite coming out decades after Part 3 and 4, I think it fits very well into this time period. It follows Parts 4 through 6, centralizing around cleaning up the damage left by Dio and his influence. This being an in-between of Part 3 and 4 made it very interesting for me as a JoJo fan. My favorite part is 4, and my least favorite, though I do still like it, is 3. So this is right in the middle of both extremes of JoJo for me. I can happily say that this works to its advantage, as I enjoyed it elevating aspects of Part 3, and I love seeing more of my favorite Joestar and his family. My favorite aspect of the story is how it expands on the characters of Part 3. This series does a great job at logically continuing where things left off for some of the characters, as well as giving us some backstory for some of the others who aren't directly involved in this story. The most compelling aspect of the story is how the trauma Dio left affects all the characters. Seeing how they've continued on past their partnership with Dio is really interesting. The users still staying in Egypt have changed, but the scars from their mental and physical battles have still remained. On the funny end, we have Whole Horse wearing 3 watches because getting the time wrong is what took him out in the second fight. On the sad end, we have Maria and Whole Horse getting anxiety attacks every time they get reminded of Dio. They acknowledged that they were not controlled by living buttons, but they still gave up their free will out of fear and desire. I have to continue praising everything past Part 3, making Dio a much more compelling villain in Part 3. I think he is the worst executed villain as a character, exclusively going just one part at a time. It's not terrible, of course, but his history and his personality was very poorly used in my opinion. I honestly like Part 1 Dio a lot more, but especially Part 6, and now this, have made his post-100-year slumber persona much better and more interesting than it was initially displayed. Speaking of Dio, one of my favorite details is that Dio's stand rush is used as an intimidation attack. That makes sense in-universe due to Dio and his stand strength, and his presence, but it also feels like a funny meta joke to have Muda Muda spammed at an enemy to incapacitate them. And it fits with this manga's theme of Dio's actions having lasting consequences. By using memories of Dio, the characters are both literally and figuratively still fighting against Dio. Whole Horse's character growth here felt very in line with his character and was especially good. Boingo's growth was also good, with it diving into his dependency on Toth and his brother. I also really enjoyed the expansion of Toth from just a book to seemingly being a conscious entity of a stand. One of my favorite scenes is when Whole Horse grabs Boingo and runs with him after he wakes up soon after his second battle with the Joestars. This already shows how Whole Horse was changing, as he didn't need to grab Boingo and help them escape too. And this plays into both of them being better people by the end, as well as gives him, while not particularly deep or natural, a point of connection with Kakuin. I really love the scene of both Whole Horse and Boingo being injured, scared, vulnerable people. And this shot is absolutely my favorite part of the manga. It was beautiful, and really everything together made me feel emotional. When it comes to the Kakuin family, it fits in perfectly to have a member of his family question his disappearance. The community has talked about this idea many times. Here, I think it's executed well. I liked seeing more of Kakyoin's inner thoughts again controlled by Dio and joining the fight. This definitely elevated him a bit as a character for me. And Ryoko's role made the story much more engaging, by having Josuke and Whole Horse have more conflicts to deal with, and serves to further show the cause and effects of the battle in Egypt. Onto the Part 4 characters, I was happy to see Josuke on the page just being himself. I don't think anything here changes how I view his character or anything, but it was fun just seeing him do his thing, because I love Josuke as a character. I'll also talk more about Josuke in a bit. I'm glad we got a decent amount of scenes with Josuke's grandpa, showing how he views Josuke and his job. One of my few criticisms of Part 4 is that it felt largely forgotten about. I adore Great Days. I do think is my favorite opening, but I'm really sad that Josuke's grandpa was not pointing down at them from heaven like the others who were killed. He isn't missing because those were only victims of Kira who still need to be avenged. Keicho is there, and he died to Red Hot Chili Pepper, who they already defeated by then. I really wish he was there, and that Josuke had gotten some flashbacks to him to further show his motivation over the course of the part, or that he used his words to change some of the bad stand users, something along those lines. But getting to see him and Josuke here is great enough fan service for me to be very happy as a super fan of Part 4 and Josuke. Now, moving on to the main plot, I think it was solidly interesting and functional for what it was aiming to do. It was really fun seeing Josuke and Whole Horse bounce off each other and work together. They both have really strong personalities that can bring them into conflict, but also allow them to work together momentarily. And we see how that plays out well in multiple scenarios. As previously said, it allowed for the themes of Jojo to come through very strongly. When it comes to the primary fights against the main enemy, I think it's fine, and feels in line with a standard enemy stand user of the week encounter. The stand ability is solidly interesting, and the execution feels spot on as a Jojo action sequence. We have the crazy display of abilities, great use of the environment by the characters, smart tactics mixed with straightforward ones, it's got brutality, and the gags that we love Jojo for. It's a fun, solid fight overall. But I would also say it's not especially memorable amongst the many stand user fights that we have in this series. It's solid and would be right at home in the main series, but one I don't expect to revisit. I will admit that this is probably biased a little bit by only being in manga form, as I think JoJo's incredible sound design and voice acting heavily elevates the series. And in motion, it also makes the often complicated fights of JoJo a bit easier to follow. I don't think this one was particularly hard to follow though. The main villain is very much an average, minor JoJo villain. His motivation is not particularly interesting, but he does have some personality. He successfully serves the purpose of being an asshole who deserves his defeat. My favorite thing about him is that he's a police officer of Morio. This plays into the Part 4 theme of danger hidden in normalcy, and not being able to trust anyone. This also lets him be a foil to Josuke's grandpa. Both of them have a position of power that can be abused and puts you above others. Haraya has some stuff I like, and some stuff I don't, which I just think makes them very average. Not bad, but also not particularly spectacular. The art style and quality are also great in my opinions, and I do think they reach the standards of Jojo and Araki's drawing. The poses, the backgrounds, the level of detail is very good, and also very well portrayed anatomy. That we really love in Araki's style, I don't think is missing here. Obviously, it's not Araki's, but I think it looks great. Whole Horse in particular, I think looks really great in this style. They really did him service. And now, onto a big question that always comes up with spin-off stories from big series. Is it canon? To my knowledge, that has not been confirmed. Some people go by Araki's involvement in it, or by what he says, or saying everything official is canon. I don't care that much about whether this is canon or not, honestly. It's fun to think about, but I recommend not taking it so seriously that it hurts your enjoyment of anything. I think it should just be up to the individual reader to take what they want out of spin-offs. Especially in this case here where the part of the story it covers is long since finished. It doesn't really change anything major. So I think you should just do what you want with this information. In my case, I'm taking what I like from it as canon, and what I don't like really is not. That's kind of my broad answer. But to give a more detailed and concrete answer, I would prefer this not be canon when it comes to the main story, but I'll take some of the minor details I like as being true in my head. Starting off, I don't think this should be canon because of Josuke learning about stands from Whole Horse. I've seen other people cite this as their reason for it being non-canon as well. I rewatched the first episode of the Part 4 anime when I was putting this together, and while Jotaro does not explain stands to Josuke, nothing Josuke says or does definitively states that he did not know that information already. Josuke does not say anything to acknowledge what Jotaro said in that moment, and carries on normally afterwards after understanding what stands are. Unless there is something later that I'm forgetting about, that you can feel free to give your perspective or correct me, Josuke could have known about stands already, and have that not really conflict with Part 4. So while I don't like the idea of him already knowing, that on its own wouldn't really bother me. But where I would take issue with this is this not being his first stand encounter. That would, to me, make Josuke's early development feel a bit worse. To me, one purpose of his grandfather's death was to give Josuke a reality check. While he was always a good person who believed in helping people and stopping bad people and staying true to justice, I don't think he was taking life all that seriously. He was a teenager with incredible power that let him heal people and effortlessly defeat any normal person. But in his first encounter with a truly dangerous person, he doesn't take Angelo seriously enough after capturing him, and that costs his grandfather his life. That gives him inspiration to be more proactive and protect the town the way his grandfather did. I love this aspect of his character. But in this story, Josuke goes through a dangerous stand encounter that even included him experiencing events that killed people directly in front of him. I believe this story would have already inspired him to take life more seriously. So if this story is canon, then I don't think it fits well for how Josuke acts the way he does in his first encounter with Angela. What I'm considering canon here is the general situation of all the Part 3 anime stand users post Part 3. I don't see any reason why everything we see in Egypt can't be canon, and it's nice to think that getting defeated by the stand users of the Stardust Crusaders left some of them as better people, but still suffering in Dio's wake. I'm really glad that we're continuing to get content here, and that there are still things going on with the first 6 parts. If we were to get another spin-off, I would love to see stories within the realms of parts 1 and 2. Please give me some classic Hamon and vampires. Going further backwards into the lore of Hamon users would be really awesome. I've always loved Hamon and would love to see more of it. That's another minor nitpick that I have with Part 3. I wish Joseph used Hamon more throughout the part, and that they had at least acknowledged it as an option in more of the fights than just the fight with Dio, and maybe another moment here or there. With that, I'll bring this to an end. Specifically, if you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on Jojo, please check out my Let Characters Keep Their Secrets video, where I praise Miyutaka from Part 4. Thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed, and check out my website, Blog Under a Log, in the description, which has write-ups of pretty much all of my videos, and some articles that have not made it to YouTube, such as my manga chapter reviews of Bocchi the Rock, and some articles written by other people. I also have a Patreon if you'd like to financially support me, or as a free member, you can get updates on when I upload on my blog and here on my YouTube channel.